Hello everyone, I'm Morali and welcome to the channel. With the recent announcement of Secrets of the Obscure, I wanted to take a deeper dive into some theories and interesting tidbits I've thought of over the last few days. If you didn't know, the day of the announcement I wanted to stream to talk about the balance update, and ended up doing a 2-hour dive into the announcement and all the stuff they showed us that day. So if you're interested in seeing my initial reactions to everything, I'll leave a link to that stream down below. But today, I want to summarize not only the thoughts and theories we had on stream, but everything that came to mind afterwards. There were some interesting things in terms of lore that ArenaNet has left behind for a long time, but perhaps we might see some of this finally resolve. I will also note here that I will be going off on tangents a lot as I try to combine different parts of the lore and characters, so we'll be doing a lot of jumping around. But with all this exciting stuff to talk about, let's just get right into it. First off, I want to talk about the trailer, with the theories and observations we made, and then get deeper into more obscure things, as one would say. We did a pretty good analysis of the trailer on stream, so let's go through it one by one. The first few things we see are rifts opening up all around what seems to be Tyria, and I say seems to be because of something we will touch on later, and some Sauron eye looking thing inside the rifts. We can see a couple of places in Alona as well as Cantha, but I don't think we can see anything specific. Alona is interesting, but I will get to that later on as well. Then we get the text, Ancient Fractures Deepen. This appears to speak of some kind of conflict from olden times, probably involving the Astral Ward and the Cryptus, which are both things getting introduced with this expansion. We then get some much more interesting parts. It says the tower falters, and it shows us Garenhof and Keswick's Hills, with the new model of the floating Wizard's Tower above. Could the text be hinting that whoever is in the tower is shielding the world from something unknown? Perhaps the tower itself is what's keeping this evil at bay? We know that supposedly the wizard Isgaren is the current ruler of the tower, and he hasn't been seen in a long time. We also know that he's the one who sends the elementals to the town to serve the people, and that he once in a while invites people to come stay at the tower, but those people are never heard from again. The only other thing we know is that Isgaren visited the Mystic Forge at some point, but Zormaros does not know what items he exchanged. Speaking of wizards, there was also a Grand Wizard Garen who designed the gardens in the Upper City in Divinity's Reach. Both wizards have similar names, but it's unclear if they're related. Why bring up some random Grand Wizard though? Well, looking at the gardens, you can see a clear celestial theme to them, which seems to be a theme with the Astral Ward, a faction that we'll see in the Secrets of the Obscure, and it seems to be a design that is reoccurring with this organization. So, is the Grand Wizard part of this organization? Guild Wars 1 might shed some light as to what's stored within the tower, because there we protected the tower from being taken over by two separate bad guys. One was Galrath, who was seeking to learn the arcane magic said to have been hidden in the tower. We defeat him before he can accomplish this feat. The other is Verada, who's perhaps more interesting. Verada was once a necromancer trainer and was part of what was simply known as the Order. I'll talk about the Order in a second, but after this hearing, Verada became obsessed with this research and started practicing necromancy on his own people. He was kicked out of the Order, and before we could kill him, escaped. He reappeared around the Wizard's Tower, where he had banded together the cult of Verada. Since there are no quests involved with him there, it's unclear if killing him is considered canon or not, so he could have perhaps survived. Maybe he himself is Isgaren, or perhaps his ancestor. Verada was very powerful, as there were 4 necromancer skills named after him in Guild Wars 1, and like I said earlier, he was also part of the Order, which makes him a very influential practitioner of magic, and he could have obtained some way of becoming immortal or giving himself a really long lifespan, both things that we have seen mortals do in this universe. Now, going back to the Order, they were a group of mostly Ascalonian necromancers who were set to prevent the abuse of necromancy. They weren't all necromancers though. We know of one member that was an elementalist. Elementalist Azuari. I don't know how to pronounce that, but that isn't important. She's an elementalist trainer in Guild Wars 1, who talks about the Order investigating different disciplines of magic, in this case water magic. So the Order doesn't just seem to be interested in necromancy. Going down the rabbit hole further, she also asks us if we can bring the Order any new knowledge of time, life, or truth. So it appears that the Order is very mysterious and is interested in more than just preventing abuse of necromancy, and seeks to gain knowledge of all kinds of magic, probably arcane included. We will also talk about where this trainer is located in the game in a minute, so keep that in mind, but for now, let's return to the trailer. At this very point, pay close attention to the actual town and surrounding areas here, as this will become important in a minute. We are then taken to a chamber inside the tower, and surprise surprise, it looks to have a very celestial theme, with orbs floating throughout, a small hologram of the planet, and a magical doorway like a Stargate sort of thing in the back, with a magical astral-like texture throughout it. Above the door are 6 symbols. Here we theorize that perhaps this could be the All represented, since we see orbs floating around as well as 6 symbols, which each could represent the spheres of influence the Elder Dragons had. These symbols are also shown on the website for the expansion, with 3 of them being used for the specific releases of the expansion. I do not know if these have any meaning or significance, but it's definitely something to keep in mind as we venture into the actual releases of the Secrets of the Obscure. Back to the room though. We see the room shake and rumble, and the gate in the back starts to either close or transform. Now I say transform because the effect used here is really strange, and we noted that once the gate quote unquote closes at the end of the scene, you can see something move in the fog-like texture. Again, I don't know if this was just the effect used here, or if there's something being hinted at inside the gate. The trailer then zooms back out to the town, and we see the tower disappear as a blinding magical explosion envelops the screen. We are then treated to a destroyed Garenhof. Everything is on fire, it's storming, and the smoke and dust make it hard to clearly see any details. The camera slowly pans out, and we get the text, "Can you protect Tyria, champion?" Now this was probably the most interesting part of the whole trailer for me. First off, I want to say that I think the text here is being used to deter our gaze from what's happening on screen. Remember how I told you to take note of the town and its surroundings earlier? Well, if you go back and do a before and after with the town, the difference isn't just simply that the town is now destroyed, but it seems that the textures on the houses and the building materials as well seem to be completely different. You can also see to the right of the screen that there's a strange stone bridge where the water was before. The actual ships can be seen underneath it, all but destroyed. People lie dead in the streets, and we see a giant chasm has formed in the middle of town. Like I said, if you do a before and after and pay really close attention to the town, you can spot a lot of differences, even though the layout seems to be the same for both places, so it's clearly supposed to be Garenhof, but it's so different at the same time. Why do the houses have such different models? Is it just updated to make the town look better for the expansion? Where did all the water go? After all, this is a town right on the edge of the entire unending ocean. All of this is very mysterious, but what if I can offer some kind of explanation? So, we go back to the release website of the expansion. Here we see a section that says, "An archipelago in the sky." If you scroll through the pictures underneath, you can come across a very fascinating entry. Reading the text underneath the Skywatch archipelago picture, it says, "Discover a chain of islands high above Tyria, where distorted, alternate universe reflections of the world below have taken on lives of their own." So, dear viewer, could this perhaps mean that we are not looking at the Garenhof that we know from Keswick's Hills, but a distorted version that is part of the island chain in the sky? It would most certainly explain all the differences we see, specifically the missing ocean part, as we would be high up in the sky. Maybe the pictures of the earlier places where the portals open are also from the distorted world in the sky? Particularly the Canthan section looked very different than anything we've seen so far in Cantha. But we aren't quite done with the new Garenhof. Perhaps the most essential part of this picture is the most obscured one, those 2 spires in the back of the scene. They are close to where the Wizard's Tower was, but look completely different. The spires don't look like anything we've seen before in Tyria. Or have we? Well, let me tell you a little tale of something that happened recently. Right before the expansion was announced, there were a couple of leaks that talked about the expansion, one of which was an image of the account upgrade for Secrets of the Obscure. Now, we have seen these before, and at first glance this was nothing special, but I took a closer look and came up with a theory. When I saw the image, I noticed that there was a map inside the arrow next to the box. I immediately went and searched through all of the Guild Wars 2 maps to discover if perhaps a known location was shown. I couldn't find anything that even closely resembled it. I started staring at the picture even more, and I noticed that it didn't look like a Guild Wars 2 map, but rather a Guild Wars 1 map, a very specific one at that. Although it doesn't perfectly align, I compared it to the pre-Searing Ascalon map, and it was a very close match in terms of color and style. I thought that perhaps we could be dealing with time travel? Something to do with Ascalon before the Searing? Nothing really to go on though, as it was just one small image. That was pretty much the end of that thought. Now, when the trailer released, I had a sort of epiphany. Something clicked in my brain, and I realized that the 2 spires in the back look very similar to a certain structure in pre-Searing Ascalon, the Wizard's Folly Tower. Now I know a bunch of you guys who didn't play Guild Wars 1 are at a loss as to what the heck the Wizard's Folly Tower is. Well, let me tell you that there were 2 Wizard's Towers in Guild Wars 1. One of them was the obvious one that we see in Keswick's Hills. The other is the Wizard's Folly Tower, which was named after the area it was erected in, that being Wizard's Folly. We know nothing about this tower or its purpose, and after the searing, it was believed by players to have been destroyed by the searing. It has a very distinct look to it, with 2 large spires being the main component. Now, that isn't the only thing that connects this tower to the other tower. Remember Elementalist Azuri? Whatever, in any case, when we first meet her in Guild Wars 1, where is she located? Well, I'm sure you figured it out, but yes, she was standing directly underneath the Wizard's Folly Tower. I know that perhaps I'm stretching a lot of things here, but let's review all the connections. We know that arcane magic was said to have been stored in the Wizard's Tower in Keswick's Hills. We also know that Verada, a member of the Order who was a powerful mage, was lurking around this tower. We also know that the Elementalist trainer Azuri? I give up, this is the last time I swear, who was also part of the Order, was located at the other Wizard's Tower. And we know that this mysterious Order is interested in all kinds of magic. And lastly, of course, is the aforementioned map story, where I think we see part of pre-searing Ascalon. So could the 2 towers be connected? Could this Order finally be revealed to us in the new expansion? Perhaps Isgaren and Garen are part of this Order? Maybe the Order is actually the Astral Ward? I just think that it's very strange that in the trailer where the floating Wizard's Tower was, we now see a different structure, and it coincidentally is made up of 2 long thin spires, like the other Wizard's Tower. I do think there might be something here, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Back to the trailer though, as I have a lot more to talk to you guys about. So next we see the title of the expansion, with the logo of the Wizard's Tower. After that, we see one of the rifts, now gigantic, and some kind of demon creature in front of it. We also hear the laugh track that was previewed before. So what are we looking at? Well, people have been coming up with all kinds of theories about this creature. I myself theorized it could perhaps be a lich, like Vizier Kilbron was, or maybe it is him. For those of you that don't know who Kilbron is, here's a quick breakdown. Kilbron, under the order of Abaddon, sunk ore into the ocean by reading forbidden scrolls and causing a cataclysm. He then tried to get his hands on the Scepter of Ore so he could take over Tyria. We defeat him as the final boss of the original Guild Wars, and later in Nightfall in the Realm of Torment, where he ended up at after we killed him the first time around. That was my initial theory though. Since then, I've heard people say that the silhouette matches Deimos minus the huge appendages the character in the trailer has. Now at first I was not on board with this theory at all, but after playing the newest Fractal, it seems the demon lore has deepened by a lot. If you have not played the newest Fractal, we actually get some interesting lore concerning Canaxai and the new Cryptus faction of demons, as well as perhaps some cool connections to existing lore. I recently made a video talking about Canaxai and all the things in the Jade Sea, but what's important is that he was a demon that lurked beneath the Jade Sea and corrupted the Luxan people that ventured too deep into the Jade. In the new Silent Surf Fractal, we find out that he's feeding on the negative emotions of the people that died during the Jade Wind. We also hear him having a conversation with someone else, and Canaxai says that he's not ready to return yet, possibly speaking about wherever in the mists he is from. One of the biggest lore drops we get during this fight is the moment Canaxai introduces himself as the Scythe of House Arcus. This seems to insinuate that the demon group he's part of has different houses like factions within it. One of the rewards that we can get from this fractal is the axe skin Last Words. At first I thought this was a replica of the axes Canaxai uses in the fractal, but it looks like a unique skin. Here's the kicker though. The axis description states that all of House Mosin wailed as Canaxai cleaved their founder in twain. So now we know of 2 different houses, Arcus and Mosin, who could perhaps be at war with each other, or at least there's some kind of struggle hinted at here. We have never known the demons to have a civilization or a culture of any kind, but alas, they seem to be much more organized than we were ever led to believe. After defeating Canaxai, he leaves, swearing to return. This fractal takes place about 200 years before Guild Wars 1. In Guild Wars 1, we face off against Canaxai and defeat him there too, but is he truly gone? Could he perhaps return as part of the Cryptus invasion force of Amnidas? Maybe the creature in front of the rift is Canaxai in a new form. Only time will tell. That's pretty much Canaxai though. So what about Deimos is so interesting, and what possible connection do we have? Well, let's look at the models of both enemies. Canaxai's new model in the fractals has obviously much more detail to it than in Guild Wars 1. One important feature is the arm across the chest of the model. This is a new motif that seems to be part of the Cryptus faction. Long fleshy arms with hands and dark spikes coming out at the end. This is something we see not just in Canaxai, but the surrounding areas of where we fight him. Looking at the Deimos model, we can see that same motif return. Around his neck, Deimos has a bunch of arms and hands, and he also has dark spikes coming out. In the Bastion of the Penitent, the raid wing where Deimos is the final boss, we do not get much info on what Deimos really was, other than some demonic force. Could he perhaps be part of the Cryptus Demon faction? Was he at the prison to feed on the negative emotions of the prisoners like Sol D'Alessio? It certainly would make a lot of sense. I'm definitely thrilled to get more demon lore, and perhaps at some point we will venture wherever these demons hail from and learn about their different houses and leaders. The last image we get after the pricing and so on is concept art of 3 characters closing a rift. We see the wizard's tower high in the sky with dragons flying around. We theorize that the character in the middle might be Iscaran, but it was also pointed out that this could represent the player character. More interestingly though, are the 2 figures beside them. To the left we have an Asura who we theorized looked a lot like Zoja. Now Zoja hasn't appeared in the story for a long time, but back on the website we see a model of exactly what Zoja looks like in-game. Now that all but confirms it, right? Well, actually there was a conversation on Twitter involving Felicia Day, who's the voice actress for Zoja, and it seems that not only her, but ArenaNet were playing coy when asked if she had returned. I think that makes it fairly clear, and bringing her back into the story at this point is probably the best way to do it. We haven't seen or heard from Zoja in years, and it could perhaps be explained that she joined this mysterious order in the sky and just dealt with things up there while we were dealing with the Elder Dragons down below. While it wouldn't change my excitement if she was back or not, I really do like Zoja as a character, and Felicia Day is a huge inspiration for me, so it's definitely something I would welcome. Moving on though, what about the character to the right? At first glance, everyone will immediately think of this being some kind of Jinn, yes? We have already talked about Zomoro, so it wouldn't be too far-fetched. Jinn are powerful magical creatures, so having those be part of the people of Amnitis in the sky is definitely very possible. But I want to throw a different theory out. We talked on stream about how this could also be a seer. In Guild Wars 2, these are all thought to be extinct. The only info we really get is through the Ara explorable path that explains that the Seers were part of the 5 ancient races that fought the Elder Dragons. They were also the ones that created the original Bloodstone, which the gods shattered. From Guild Wars 1, where we see a few Seers, including what was believed to be the last one, we learn that they could infuse armor and were very powerful magical beings all around. Now, why do I believe this person on the right is a Seer? Well, the clothing. When comparing Jinn and their clothing to the picture, you can see some distinct differences. Jinn's garbs are usually somewhat tattered, almost resembling a mummy look of sorts. Even someone more prosperous that doesn't live in Alona like Zomoro's still looks like he wears tattered rags. All of the Jinn we have seen so far also have headwear. They all have something either around their head and face or wear some kind of headgear like that. Now compare this to the concept art. First of all, the clothing this creature is wearing is much more regal looking. We also have an interesting collar for the outfit. It somewhat resembles that of the Seer outfit that we see in Guild Wars 1. The Seers in Guild Wars 1 were grey with 4 arms and hands and wore nothing around their head like the image. So it's certainly a strong possibility that this is a Seer rather than a Jinn, as it would be really cool having them play a part in the story. Now while we are talking about Seers and Ara, in the explorable path where we find out about the Seers, we are joined by a Priory scholar named Randall Grayston. I did make a video on him a long time ago, but point is that he was the forward scholar about the Seers in the Priory, and by the end of this explorable path, he vanishes into the mists, looking for the gods. If we have Seers back in the fray, maybe we could potentially find out what happened to Randall as well? Not sure if that is super relevant, but we are talking about the mists with distorted worlds and powerful magic, so it's definitely a possibility. One last thing concerning this image is the rift and the surrounding area. Within the rift, it looks like there's a fiery figure that could match what the demons like Canaxai or Deimos look like, albeit just as a silhouette. We also see the hand and arm motif once again with smoky dark hands coming out of the portal, further supporting that Canaxai and Deimos are somehow connected to this new Cryptus faction. We're done with the trailer, but as you can see by the length of this video, we're hardly done altogether. So what else could we talk about? Well, when I went through some of the concept art, I noticed some familiar faces. The art for the cryptas was ringing a bell deep in my lore-filled brain, which is apparently the only info my brain seems to retain nowadays. But in seriousness, I thought for about a whole day on what this reminded me of. And once again it came to me, Guild Wars Utopia. Okay, listen, I know I've been throwing all kinds of weird stuff at you guys this whole time, and I'm sorry about that, but this one is seriously interesting. Guild Wars Utopia was a cancelled 4th standalone campaign for the original Guild Wars. It was cancelled after ArenaNet decided to go and make Guild Wars 2 instead. So a lot of concepts and ideas were put into the Eye of the North expansion for Guild Wars, which was leading up to Guild Wars 2 by introducing new races and the conflict with the Elder Dragons, and Guild Wars 2 also saw a lot of ideas and themes created for Utopia, namely things like the Chronomancer. Other ideas ArenaNet had included things like an idea for an enemy called Tenix, which eventually became the Destroyers. Golems, which were supposed to have been created by the old gods, were given to the new race, the Asura, and things like character design motifs were randomly placed in dungeons and so on and so forth. So what was Utopia and why is it important here? Well, Utopia was supposed to take place in Zoteca, an island in the mists. It was supposed to have a Mesoamerican aesthetic and occasional elements from South America. An expanded pantheon of the gods, namely Duena's father, was supposed to be introduced as well as characters from across the timeline, like Gwen and Saul D'Alessio. The idea of a floating island seems to return for this expansion, as well as the idea that this is a central hub for players. So could perhaps other ideas return here as well, like the gods or multiverse stuff with the distorted worlds? Back to the original point though, the concept art. When looking at the Utopia art and comparing it once again to the new art released on the website, we can see some similarities with some of the character designs from Utopia. So it seems that another enemy type, which was unnamed until now, returns from the old concept of the Utopia expansion in the form of the cryptas. Maybe this hints to more of those concepts coming back? We're slowly getting to the end of this massive lore/theory collection. Remember how way early on I said to keep Alona in mind? Well, there's a reason for this. So in Nightfall, which was the Alona release for the original Guild Wars, you were able to come across a very interesting character by the name of Baltec. This arrogant and strange guy appears at random in certain areas of Istan. Each time you come across him, he spouts a bunch of gibberish, using a lot of big words. But is it all really gibberish? I won't go into intricate detail on what he says, but you guys can check out his full dialogue on the wiki, which is super fascinating. But from what we can gather in his dialogue, it seems that he's a sort of planeswalker, traveling between different planes of existence. He talks about ghost ships being echoes from other dimensions that we never see in-game, looking for the gods in the sky, saying water is very powerful and can be used for scrying, and most importantly artifacts that are buried deep within Farinur. He says these artifacts belong to a very powerful mage that was from an exceptionally advanced civilization and was able to traverse different planes of existence, hinting at yet another character I want to talk about in a bit. So Baltag seemed really out of place for what Istan was, and I think it would be very fitting for him to be part of the Astral Ward. Maybe within the Astral Ward, he's designated to the Istan area and therefore that is why we see him out there? Nevertheless, his dialogue is pretty funny and could hint toward other things to come. So who's the other character hinted at? Well, Lord Audren. I know we've talked about a lot of different people in this video, and this one is just as obscure as the rest, let me tell you. But Lord Audren was a powerful arcanist that specialized in the study of temporal distortions, so you can already see where I'm going with this. Apparently he was so powerful that he ended up opening rifts into the center of the mist, which was considered the rift, where the Hall of Heroes is. He ended up getting killed by the spirits of the people that he sacrificed to obtain these crazy powers. It's believed that Baltag was referring to Lord Audren when he talked about the powerful mage that could traverse dimensions. Albeit he's dead, but you never know with crazy time and dimension traveling wizards. Perhaps he was also part of the Astral Ward? Just another contender for membership into this mysterious organization. The very last thing I want to talk about today is a strange island off of the coast of Alona. In Nightfall, you come across a trio of princes. One of them, Prince Metu the Wise, has a library in Vabi. When you speak to him here and ask him about the library, he tells you that he has texts and scrolls from around the world, including Or, Kryta, Istan, Korna, and stranger places yet. He goes to mention that he even has stone tablets that were found on an island far off the coast, which mysteriously disappeared after the tablets were retrieved. So we have some ancient stone tablets with whatever knowledge was carved onto those and an island that disappears. Well, we just watched a trailer with a floating island that also seemingly disappeared, which is said to hold ancient arcane magic, possibly other things like texts and tablets. So would it be crazy to think that this other island could potentially be part of the Skywatch archipelago? Well, I suppose we will have to wait and see. And that concludes the very long, arduous journey through the random things we thought of together, and other things that popped into my mind. Which of these do you think will play a role in the upcoming expansion, and which of these do you think will have nothing to do with what's happening in the sky high above Tyria? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you would like to see more of this stuff, consider subscribing as it would help me out tremendously. I hope you guys enjoyed this trip, and thank you for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!